White House has confirmed that President Trump will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping next week. The two leaders will speak on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. You'll hear us call it APEC. It's in South Korea, and it's next Thursday. The president will then participate in a bilateral meeting with Xi at the end of a three-country tour through Asia. While the White House hasn't disclosed the topic of the meeting, it comes as tensions between the U.S. and China have only risen. President Trump announced a 100% tariff on Chinese exports, which is scheduled to take effect just 2 days after their planned meeting. High stakes. We'll talk about it with White House correspondent for USA Today, Francesca Chambers. So this meeting comes very close to the scheduled tariff increase, and we've seen these negotiations at a very stop-start nature. The president most recently threatening another 100% tariff on Xi. What's going to happen here? What are White House officials telling you?
Well, Ali, it's pretty clear, given the deadline here, that President Trump wants to go in himself and have the last bit of these negotiations. And we've seen him with these threats, right, both on Truth Social and verbally, when he wants to be the one to have the upper hand, right? He wants to go out and carry a big stick, you could say, with these trade talks. So we'll see if those actually end up going to effect, as we're talking about, if the leaders are able to sit down one-to-one and hash out a trade deal. But it is significant now that they're meeting, because the president had suggested repeatedly that they might not even sit down and talk. So now we hear that they will be.
We now hear that they will be. But as we go into the weekend and look ahead to next week, what are the other goals of this trip? Where else is he going? Just give us a little bit of a primer.
So you might recall that during the first time that he was in office, he took a... Oh, wait, of course you would recall. You and I were both on the same trip.
We were on that trip.
We were both on the same... You're like, yes, I do recall that. We were both on that long Asia trip that the president did. And his first stop on that one as well, I believe, was Japan. And then he also did on that trip Vietnam and South Korea and a couple of Asian countries. So I would say it's akin to that, right? He's visiting countries in Asia that are U.S. allies. He's going to Japan, South Korea, and then also, interestingly, Malaysia is part of this trip, because he's going to some of these economic forums. These are great places for U.S. presidents to meet a whole bunch of leaders all at one time.
A whole bunch of leaders all at one time, but coming at a moment, too, where the trade war has touched so many of these countries. And so from a trade perspective, if we pivot specifically back to China, are administration officials previewing that, like, they want to get a deal after this meeting, or are they not putting the stakes that high? Because the calendar says the stakes are that high.
I don't think that they're putting the stakes that high per se. But again, you have heard the president specifically threaten and say, you know, I'm really going to do it. I swear to goodness, I'm going to do it, you know, multiple times, and then but also move the date multiple times, too, when it felt like they just weren't quite to where they needed to be on a deal. But the president also, on the Asia trip before, he had gone to China on that particular trip. So we'll see if there's something like that they work out in the future, too.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that was one of the first major swings of the first administration. I'm still sleep deprived from it. But you are also here on a bit of sleep deprivation because of the way that you spent your week. You were traveling with the vice president as he went throughout the Middle East. Talk a little bit about what you saw specifically on the ground in Israel. We covered a lot of that as it was happening live, but what were the things behind the scenes, the kinds of questions that the vice president was asked?
Absolutely. Yes, sure. Bear with us, folks. We got back very late last night to Washington, D.C. on this short notice trip to Israel that the vice president took. His team still wasn't even confirming it up until just minutes before we were about to take off on Air Force Two to go to the Middle East. And he is part of a succession of U.S. leaders who have been in Israel this week. First, there was Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, who he overlapped with a little bit and had a briefing with behind closed doors. And then Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, is there now, too. So you had both the vice president meet with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, and then almost immediately after, you saw the Secretary of State do the same thing. Now, you have seen that U.S. officials, including the vice president, have been pushing back on this idea that they were either there to babysit or babysit, right, the Israeli prime minister. The vice president told me when I asked him about the succession of leaders, he said, we're here to monitor the ceasefire, but we are not here to monitor like you would monitor a toddler. So those comments getting some attention, I hear, back in the United States and also across the world.
Well, I mean, as I was watching, I also saw the vice president sort of dodge on any question that that would force him to put specifics down, specifically when it comes to the role that Hamas, for example, would play on the ground in Gaza. Obviously, he issued, I think in response to a question that you asked, the idea that they have to disarm, that they have to stop killing the Palestinian people. That's one of the things that Israel says, OK, they're violating the ceasefire. Now, the White House still has the posture that the ceasefire is in effect. But when you see Vance on the ground not engaging with the specifics, are they at least engaging with those specifics behind the scenes? Because that's where some of the pessimism comes from on what the future of this deal is.
Yes, and I was trying to push him as we were about to take off on Air Force Two to come back to the United States. He spoke to reporters on what it was that he felt that he accomplished on this trip specifically, beyond just keeping the ceasefire deal intact, what they felt that they were able to achieve on this phase 2 of the president's 20-point peace plan. You're right about them not being very clear on all those details, but he did say he felt they made progress on what this international stabilization force would potentially look like. That's the policing force that they say they'd have go into Gaza to help police Gaza and train vetted Palestinian police officers, according to them. Now, he didn't say which countries were going to be part of it, per se, but I did ask about the fact that Bibi Netanyahu would seem to suggest he would not be okay with Turkish forces being part of it. The vice president said he didn't rule out any country specifically, but he did say that Netanyahu has some strong opinions, negative and positive, towards some countries.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's true. And it's interesting to see the way that those details, I think, are going to trickle out, kind of like this. Are we putting red lines around Turkish forces? I mean, what could this security force look like? I think all of that is really interesting, and I think very much coming together in real time. You had a front row seat. Francesca Chambers, go take a nap. Thank you for coming on. Appreciate it.